There was that prince who had never seen himself. One day he was out riding, hunting, when he became thirsty. So he stopped at a still pond. And when he went to drink, he saw there an image. He called his courtier and said, "Who is this that I am seeing?" And the courtier said, "Why, that's you, sire." The prince said, "How do we relate, this image and me?" And the courtier put his hands in the water and splashed the prince's face. In so doing, the image and the seeing were obliterated. How does this relate to stillness and movement, and doing and not doing? A long time ago in Afghanistan, there was a Sultan who, after a hot summer's day, was bored and decided that he would go out into the city to see how his subjects were faring. So he took off his kingly garments and clad himself in the garments of a peasant, a traveller. So as he was wandering through the city, looking in the windows, passing the coffee shops, listening to the conversations, he found himself in that part of town where the very poor people lived. But as he looked down the dimly lit street, he noticed that from one house there was a particularly bright light shining. So he made his way towards that little hut, as it was a hovel, as these places were. And he looked in the window, and there, sitting at the table, was a man and his wife, and before them was a very simple bowl of rice and salad. And the man was gently intoning devotional songs to God. But there was such an air of serenity and peace around them that the Sultan was drawn to go to the door and knock. So the man, whose name was Hamid, went to the door and asked, "Who is that?" The Sultan said, "Oh, it's just a traveller seeking some hospitality." So Hamid opened the door and invited the Sultan in disguise in and welcomed him to the table, inviting him to eat of their simple fare. After the Sultan had been served his food, Hamid went back to his soft intoning of his devotional songs to God. After the Sultan had finished eating, he asked Hamid, "What do you do for a living?" And Hamid said, "Every day I go out into town, and if anyone needs their shoes repaired, I do it immediately, and I make enough for us to eat for that day and to live as we do. But what about the future when you get old and you can't do these things anymore? Asked the Sultan. Hamid said, that is not my concern. There is something that takes care of me. Oh, said the Sultan, who is this? You don't seem to have any children, and if they are, then maybe they're young. And no, we have no children, said Hamid, and it's not a person. So the Sultan was very piqued about this. After the Sultan had taken his leave, he had a thought that he was going to test Hamid. So the very next day he made an edict, which was sent out with the town crier, that no one was allowed to repair shoes in the town. So Hamid was without a livelihood. When he went home that night, the Sultan came out again, because the night before he'd said to Hamid, if I come again, will I be welcome? Hamid said, of course, you'll be welcome in my house at any time. So the very next night after the edict had been announced, the Sultan came back to Hamid's house and inquired of him, well, what were you able to do today when you found out that you were no longer able to mend shoes? Oh, said Hamid, there was a group of water carriers coming down the street, and I saw them carrying their flagons of water, and I had a thought that I could also be a water carrier. So I went to the well and filled my flask, and then I came back to the town and I sold water, and I made as much money as I did when I was repairing shoes. Oh, said the Sultan. So the very next day he sent out his town criers to say that no one was allowed to sell water in public. Everyone had to go to the well and get their own water. So that night the Sultan came back to Hamid's house and said, well, what did you do today when you heard that you were not allowed to sell water? Hamid said, well, I did look up to the heavens and say to Allah, what is this that you want me to do? And just then a group of wood choppers came by. So I asked them, can I join you to chop wood? And I went along with them and I gathered wood, and then I came back to the town. I was able to sell it, and I had enough money for an evening meal to buy our needs. Oh, said the Sultan. So the next day, the Sultan called the captain of his guard, and he said, today I want you to round up all the wood choppers, give them a uniform and a sword, and they will be the guards at my palace. Well, of course, when the captain of the guards and his soldiers went out, Hamid was one of those who was gathered up and conscripted, given a uniform and a sword, and made to stand at a point along palace walls and stand guard all day. Well, at the end of the day, Hamid found out that guards only get paid once a month. It was the first of the month. So there was going to be no money forthcoming for one whole month. How was he going to eat? How was he going to take care of his wife? So when he was back home. He happened to look over, and there was the sheath with the sword that had been handed out to him. And he had a thought. So, as a young boy, he'd been a great whittler. So he took a piece of wood and he whittled a sword that was the image of the sword that was in his sheath. And he went out and sold the sword. He had enough money for a whole month. So when the Sultan arrived at his door, asked him how he got on, Hamid told him the whole story. Sultan said, "What about if the Sultan finds out about this?" "Oh," said Hamid, "that's not my affair. I don't have concerns about the future." Well, the next day, the Sultan said, "Everyone has to come to the town square. There is to be an execution of a man who stole a melon from my garden." So, of course, all the townspeople came. Hamid, the guard, and the rest of the guards were there. And then the Sultan instructed his head guard